Welcome back to another episode of the Skill Point podcast, the podcast on a mission to level up the recruitment marketing industry. Today, I am joined by Jamie Rose. Jamie is an ex-recruitment business owner who's now turned his attention to becoming a social selling coach and expert in personal branding. I've seen Jamie across LinkedIn for quite a while, and he's always been one that's been on the hit list to bring on to delve into this more deeper. So I think there could be a really good conversation here where I think we're going to break down things like high performing personal branding, what that looks like, and getting purpose and value driven through your personal branding efforts. And then, that actually personal branding is just one part of the huge spectrum that is social selling. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail and demystifying it. But without further ado, hi, Jamie, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited I feel like everyone puts like branding and social selling in the same box, so I'm really excited to talk about them as separate things. So I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. In our conversation before, we were saying it's got a bit of a mystified sort of feel to it, isn't it?
Right,
social
yeah.
selling.
Yeah, hopefully we can kind of get rid of that today a little bit, because truthfully, I think the minute we think something is complicated or we can't do it, we don't try and learn it because it feels difficult, right? So I think hopefully we'll be able to get rid of some of that kind of Harry Potter-esqueness around social selling and kind of show it for what it is. And it's really simple to get started.
Absolutely. So the first question I would probably throw at you before, and then we'll get you to introduce yourself, give yourself a bit of a journey. But something that's just come straight to my head is like, is traditional sales on a decline, and is social selling the kind of future of where a lot of people should, especially in the recruitment space, think about sort of focusing their efforts?
I think so. I think, if we look at any other industry, it's not a strange concept that buyer behavior has changed. Retail, the way we book tables at restaurants, none of that is considered strange. It's only when we start thinking about recruitment or talent that we seem to be a little bit kind of weirded out. The process is changing and that traditional sales is less of a relevant skill. But I honestly believe that's true. I think that for me, social selling or personal branding is being able to position yourself on the radar of clients and candidates without needing to go through that process of cold outreach. And we're able to do that. The reason I think that's going to win over traditional sales is that we get to observe them first. We get to see what the pain points are. We get to position ourselves to provide value, and we actually get to go in knowing what we need to talk about. So yes, I do. I think social selling will replace traditional sales, or it certainly could replace traditional sales.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think you're touching on the pain point side of thing. And I think once you kind of put in the effort to get social selling as well as the personal branding done for the recruitment teams, then getting that kind of data and handing it over to people like marketing or the team dealing with the product, that sort of information and that analysis can be really powerful as well. So it's nice to see this can be really homogenous in how it all works together. So let's go on to your journey, Jamie, because we had a chat about this before, and I think it's really interesting and relevant to the whole the podcast episode itself. So do you want to just run us through sort of like from Blends onwards, or even before, and like how you sort of come into this sort of space of working on social selling and personal branding?
Sure. So I guess it's interesting in the sense I never set out to do what I'm doing now. It kind of found me, I suppose. And I had said to you before, I got fired for being gay, and that's when I started Blends, a rec-to-rec agency, because it was a rec-to-rec that placed me. And I was like, that's just crazy, that they were working with people who, kind of had these issues. And it was fine. It was all okay. I was doing reasonably well. I was meeting clients, all very traditional, because I should add that January just gone is my 15th year in recruitment. So my training as far as what I considered normal or what I considered to be a day-to-day plan for a recruiter was definitely in the traditional sales. It was in trying to organize face-to-face meetings, trying to interview candidates. It was all very traditional. COVID came along and it kind of changed that, right? Suddenly nobody was recruiting. Everything was, eerily dead. And I was really concerned about what I was going to do as far as getting the business back on track. I should also add that I don't live in the UK. And, whilst we couldn't just visit people because of COVID, that was an option anyway. And that's when I turned to LinkedIn. And it was really, really ugly at first. I didn't know what I was doing, but interestingly, I didn't have anything to lose because we didn't have clients at that point anyway, right? So it was kind of like free reign to, instead of sipping wine all day in the sun, it was free reign to actually kind of do something useful. And that's where it all started. And I realized that it resolved a lot of the typical questions or problems that recruiters have, and in fact, any other business. Done well, I realized that it fixed the need of looking for candidates, and it fixed the need of finding clients that you actually want to recruit for. And that's where it all started. And I just processed everything I was doing and all the mistakes I was making. And now I coach people full time in social selling. It's crazy, right? But it started very innocently, very organically, just for my own agency. So I've never written anything. I was never part of a marketing team, traditional sales all the way. So as you can imagine, it was a very ugly, ugly transition in the early days.
No, but I think that's a good way, isn't it? I think learning the job as you go along, and then, all that insight where you've basically put in the hours, then you can go and reshare what you've done. What was the kind of the time frame on your efforts? How long did it take before you was like really cooking with gas?
I think it was probably around 3 months, but I mean, I was in my entire day was invested in it. So around 3 months, I would say, where I felt confident and I knew that content or posts or whatever was going to do something, probably around 6 months. But I certainly started seeing some of the smaller wins and things pay off in about 3 months.
Yeah, and then when you say like wins and payoffs, what did that look like for someone that was kind of exploring this a bit more?
So, well, I mean, in a revenue piece, I'd done just under 200,000 in just over 6 months of pure social selling without any outbound cold calling. And so, I guess from a financial point of view, for me, it could easily rival what somebody's able to do via a telephone or email. And really, that is just the very beginning. I think social selling, once you know the basics, where you can take that is really quite incredible and exciting. So it depends. If you think revenue, then just under 200K. If you're thinking in placements and experience and in value, then I always say I felt I grew more in that 6 months than I had in the previous few years. I definitely hit stalemate in recruitment a little bit. So from a learning trajectory, I learned a lot from that 6 months.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to personal branding, let's touch on more like a high performing, because I believe a lot of people know the benefits of it. It's very much something someone's always, they're all trying it, aren't they? And LinkedIn is becoming a little bit more messy. So how do we stand head and shoulders above everyone else? What is the right sort of approach to go from your experience?
I think the first thing I would say is it's considering what you're going to enjoy and have fun doing. I think it's like anything, isn't it? Turning up with purely like a revenue driver, it's very easy to get discouraged very, very quickly. Even in traditional sales, somebody starting out, I wouldn't say that should be their only driver, because we're not in control of that. But after that, once you know what you're going to enjoy, I think it's about, there's a whole process before you even dive into LinkedIn or, start creating sales funnels or whatever it is you want to do. I think it's about figuring out the who. And I know that sounds really, really crazy, but you would be amazed at how many people I work with. And really their main issue is they just haven't discovered the who. Therefore, they haven't considered things like their value proposition or the message or the communication style. So even before you dive into getting started, the first thing I would do is I would sit down, pen to paper if you want, and think about who is it that we're after? Where is it that they're in their, what is it that they're doing at the moment, and that's our endpoint. Just choosing a sector and a job title, I don't think is enough. It's so broad that it's going to be very difficult to resonate with an industry as a whole. I think you've got to think more like, if you want, I don't know, HR people, what is the typical pain point that they're experiencing when they're thinking about moving a job? What is it that they typically want from a promotion or a pay rise if they're moving for progression? Understanding those behaviors, those emotions, means you turn up very differently. So I think there's a whole piece before you turn up.
Yeah, amazing. So what we're talking about here is like that sort of strategic thinking, and this is something we do as a marketing agency as well. We always come in and begin a marketing plan with the whole business, and it touches on value proposition and things like that. Do you think there is a place in a recruitment agency for a main marketing strategy, but then the consultant or the founder's own little personal branding strategy that may be a little bit different?
Yeah, I'm all in on autonomy. I think giving people the space and the tools to find their own passion and their own little tribe of people, I would hate to see that go. One of the things I never realized I was passionate about this, weirdly, until something that happened. One of the things I think why I bought into social selling and personal branding so much, I realized that for a lot of small businesses, that it leveled the playing field for them. And it certainly did for me, even though small businesses are, the ones that do a lot to help the economy and all these other things. They're the ones that get the raw deal when it comes to buying job credits or job adverts or training. And it suddenly hit me that this is a really powerful tool if it's used right. So I would love to see autonomy kept individually, but I think it would be amazing if people had a central specialist or a marketing person, whoever, someone that could just guide people so they're not losing hours and hours in mistakes, or they're not getting involved in subjects and topics that alienate their market as well, because that's the other thing. You get it wrong, you confuse, and rather than helping you, it goes the other way. So yeah, I think there could be a central pillar, but I would love to see individuals retain the authority and the ability to execute what they felt was relevant.
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure. So they've got an internal like marketing team helping them with their sort of strategy. They've mapped it out themselves. But honestly, this sometimes, and I'm sure you see this as well, there's always the danger of just sticking your finger to the air and kind of assuming what the pain points are. Do you advocate going out and kind of discovering those pain points from your ideal clients or target list and just themselves?
Yeah, I kind of feel we should already know that, right? I feel if we've chosen a sector, we've got our specialism, we've got the person, and we don't really know what's going on, then I think there's definitely a problem there. Because but what I would say is I don't think it's so much about the pain point. I think it's about the emotion with the pain point, and
Sure.
that's what I always encourage people to explore. If someone said to me, "Oh, I don't know, your tire's flat," and I'd say, okay, but they hadn't found out whether I even used the car. It's not really a pain point because I know it's flat, but it's not a drama because I'm not using it. And that's where the difference between a pain point and an emotion is an emotion, we're tapping into how someone's feeling because it's a relevant pain point. And that's how we identify how meaningful it is to them. And that's, for me, that's the basis of social selling, is understanding pain has emotion and we solve emotions. So I would definitely explore how people feel when they are going through interview processes. How are people feeling when they are, thinking about applying for jobs? That, for me, that's the interesting part.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I really like that because it's so powerful, isn't it? As soon as you can attribute some kind of like raw, like emotive feeling to what's happening, and then crafting it in a way that sort of speaks directly to them. And then once you're on LinkedIn, it's not the same as emailing them. You can en masse a load of different individuals, can't you, and reach them with the same message. So say we've now had our mapped out strategy, and we understand where we go in. We've got some ideas, we've got some emotive hooks and things like that. What is the next step, and what does the journey look like for someone that wants to potentially get started with personal branding?
So, I mean, it could look different for each person. I'm always a huge advocate that help out first, and I think a lot of people turn up with actually pretty good content, if I'm honest, but it doesn't find its natural kind of roots because people don't know who you are, and we're asking them to turn up and engage. Step number one, I think, for me, any good system needs, number one is you need to be able to find people relatively easily. So, once you've got your person, the pain point, and we know where they are, how easy are they to find on social platforms? Are we able to find them without too much bother? Because if we can't, we've got a problem, right? I mean, social selling works because we're able to find people. Secondly, I would start gathering them, socially speaking, together. I would have a plan of bringing these people into my network. And I think that goes beyond just posting content. I would be looking at who they're engaging in, and certain industries might be more driven towards a Slack community rather than a LinkedIn community. So I think we'd find that the footing. Next thing I would do is turn up for them. I would start in engaging, liking, messaging, all these things, and at that point, that's when I would start growing the connections. I would then start thinking about sales funnels, webinars, nurture campaigns. I would then start thinking about like a community offering. I would then first I would build the base, then I would start gathering other options to go away from the main feed into something a bit more private, where we could be the center of like micro communities. And for me, that's kind of like a little sales funnel, right? It's about finding them, engaging, helping out. Then we start producing content and trying to put them into different categories that we can then influence into making decisions.
Yeah, that's like the holy grail, I always say, isn't it? Building a community of people, because then you can see what they're talking about, and then you can get that consistent insight on what the pain points are, what their challenges, what their day-to-day is, things that are relevant to them. So when you say you mentioned earlier a minute ago about bringing people into your network and doing things with that. Could you give me, I know you've got some sort of further down the line examples of sort of capitalizing on that, but what are some actionable things someone can do immediately to start building out that network so they are relatively unknown? What are some quick wins or sort of foundational things they need to
do? First quick win, kind of weirdly, I know, is I think like sort out your LinkedIn profile. Once you've sent that connection request, you got to guarantee they accept it, right? And I think that just a little bit of basic housekeeping on a LinkedIn profile can do that. So I think step number one, have a nice profile that people want to engage in. Step number two, I always am a huge advocate for sending connection on the back of engagement, just because I think it's just much more likely to be accepted. I think it also gets rid of the horrible scripted messages saying, oh, we share a network, or we share a connection, or, we were both born in the UK, whatever,
We're both free there.
Yeah, we're both living. I mean, it's somebody with that. I think, for me, I don't have a separate process for connecting, because I engage. If I'm engaging with them, it's because they're relevant, and I'll then connect with them once I have engaged or they've engaged with me. I think it just removes that little piece of coldness, and it's a 2-in-1 process. So I wouldn't worry about getting super strict on, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes and I'm going to do that for 10 minutes. What I would say is engage with the right people. If you're not connected, engage, connect. A nice little message, likes the post, love the post, we share the same opinion. Instantly, there's something beyond, I'm a recruiter, you're a possible candidate, or you're a possible client. So I think it's just about being, I don't know if that's smart, or if it's just, engage, again, connecting with people in a more meaningful way, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Engaging is something that I'm kind of interested on, because it always it's always the part that's forgotten, isn't it? I think when people approach personal branding, they've got a ton of ideas. Sometimes to their detriment, they make their post a little bit too complicated because they're in that higher mindset, and then they post out stuff and it doesn't really perform very well. In terms of engagement, say you're doing this, you're connecting with people that you've kind of engaged with, and you're building through your sort of hit list. Is that something that you bring that conversation immediately to the DMs, or do you think you keep it through sort of like the public liking and commenting for a while, just to build that sort of connection with them before you start reaching out with them in sort of like private messaging?
I would go straight to DM. I don't think people have an issue with DMs. People have an issue with what is written in a DM. And I mean, if you're that, quite frankly, if you're that miserable where you can't say hello to someone that you've just connected with, then that's a you problem, not a me problem. So I don't think DMs are the problem. I think we have to step away from this belief that outbound activity is bad. I don't think it is. I think what's bad is that people are hounded by horrible recruitment messages, and so that's what people don't like. So yeah, we've got to remember, if people don't know who you are and people don't know what you do, they don't know what you solve, sitting back and hoping that one post in the morning is gonna gain you this kind of trajectory of removing sales is probably a bit of an oversight. So being active, learning to message people, learning to keep in touch with people, and being proactive in how you do that is essential. It's just what you say rather than yeah.
And how does that work? Do you sort of make an intro, some niceties, and then just educate them on what you do immediately, or do you kind of nurture that relationship a little bit more?
Yeah, I'd go in for the nurture, really. I think this is why I love social selling rather than just personal branding, because let's say we connected, say the next day, it's very easy to send you a message to say, nice to connect with you, especially if we use words like human and friendly, and all things that kind of make us go down this path of a genuine connection rather than a sales. I think it's also nice if you're running communities. People want to be invited into these things. That's a free message. You've got a download of top 10 interview tips for software developers. That's a free message. You're running, webinars and, value content for salary. So, I think as long as the way I describe it is the feed is more of like a generic value, and messaging must be high value content. It must be incredibly. So if we think about a generic salary survey for the UK for developers, I would say that's generic. If someone said, oh, by the way, we connected a couple of weeks ago, we've done this for some clients, here's a copy of salary surveys for, mid developers in Cambridge with 3 years experience, that's value content, because there's clearly a thought process between the content and that person. So yeah, I go all in. I experiment with different things as well, but this is why you've got to have a system, because you've got to learn that value means different things at different points. Hello is the cheapest value. The next value is that we send them a piece of content. The next value is we get an email address for a nurture campaign. The next one is a free webinar. So it's always nice to think about messages as value, and they should be worth different things, because we should be taking them in a trajectory upwards. So yeah, I'd message people. I'd go all out, enjoy it. Just don't sell to people. That's all.
Yeah, great. I think when it comes to LinkedIn, especially, the barrier is so low with automation, isn't it? That even if you just put a little bit of effort into it and just make it a little bit more bespoke, then you're going to get a reaction, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, and it's like do you know what? I get it in a way. I think LinkedIn is so strict sometimes, it doesn't give people that space to get it wrong a little bit. And I think sometimes that's why people turn to automation, because it's sold as this tool just to help you. You don't have to be quite as good, because we'll message 10,000 people a day for you, and you feel confident because you've got numbers on your side. You don't need to do that. I think as long as you try to find that connection with people, as long as you don't fake it, like don't message someone to say I really loved your content if you didn't. Don't connect with someone because you enjoy, you want to learn more about what they're doing if you don't. And I think this is the key. And this is why I came back to sector. Recruit what you're interested in, because it really does make it so much easier. So that's why I always think just go in with fun and personal, because what's the worst that could happen? Someone doesn't apply, or someone doesn't respond, or, a client gets a bit aggy that you've messaged or whatever. That's okay. That these things happen in the same way as traditional sales. So that's the other thing I'd say, enjoy it. And if it goes a little bit pear-shaped on a couple of messages, that's okay. It's fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. No, it really doesn't, does it?
One of the first women I messaged on, on LinkedIn when I was doing it, messaged me, and she said, it's interesting because she now likes a lot of my content. But the first message she sent me when I was trying to do things a bit differently, and I'd sent an email, was that she actually sent me a message to say that they found it funny, that that they laughed at it. And it's interesting because I was like, at least I'm willing to try something new, and it was that one email sticks in my mind, that someone found it acceptable to call me out and say that they found it amusing because I was doing something different. And that's happened quite a few times. That's okay. At the end of the day, for the most part, I think LinkedIn is full of really, really nice people. But if you do get the odd thing or the odd weird message, that's definitely a them problem, not a you problem. And I'll push that all day long, because I don't think anybody should be made to feel bad for trying something new. That's why people don't try it, right?
Absolutely. Really interesting, that actually. But yeah, no, I think you're completely right on that. I think you just need to remove the separation between getting too worked up about, it is a social media, but there is, a commercial endpoint to this. So there's always going to be mistakes, up and downs and bits and pieces like that. One thing I just wanted to touch on on the personal branding side is really interesting stuff here. So in our pre-call, you mentioned mimicking the life cycle of recruitment in personal branding. Do you want to, so that's something that you did, wasn't it, when you was experimenting and working on that? Do you want to break down what that is and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think it's like a social selling thing as well as a personal branding. But
sure,
the thing we have as recruiters that's maybe slightly different if we're selling I don't know, accountancy, or if we're selling, I don't know, a screen or something, is there's a product there. What we do requires us to be, more kind of nurturing larger networks, because we don't know when somebody's looking for a job. We don't know when things are going to turn. So I started thinking about, again, back to the emotion piece, what happens in the journey when someone decides they need a job? What happens when they decide that they want to hire? All these things. And I started trying to link that to processes, and content is a really great way to drive people into these funnels of traditional recruitment. And that's why I realized you can't push people into making a decision, because you wouldn't do that in a normal process. So, for example, if I knew that somebody was looking for a job because they had a toxic boss, for example, and what we could do is position content around examples of what people have achieved by walking away from toxic bosses, and if we knew that we were recruiting a management post, and in a month's time, and it was ideal for someone who's never managed, it was like that step up, we can then start positioning pieces of content that show people why they could take it, the training. So we're almost able to use the kind of pre-part before we actually want to start targeting people, to drip feed these little seeds of thought. How we then use social selling as a way to mimic the process in clients and candidates other than content is through things like nurturing, is through things like free webinars, it's through things like networking groups. It's about seeing who turns up regularly. Once we've got that, kind of, they've turned up here, we know that mimics real behavior, and they're probably going to be a client or a candidate, and we can invest more time into them. So it's about getting people to put their position forward. It's about getting them to show us that they're interested, rather than engaging with everybody and anybody. That's the difference. It's about looking for those buyer behaviors in the same way we would in the real world.
That's really, really interesting. I really like that, especially the part about if you are placing someone in a role, or you've got a client that you want to land, figuring out the journey that ideal candidate would take, and then being able to walk backwards and produce the content around that to speak directly to them or those people. That, yes, super smart. I really like that. One thing I did want to touch on is you've mentioned sort of tracking in a way of sort of engagement, and if maybe potential people in your sort of your funnel or your sales
Yeah.
cycle are kind of engaging with you and touch points. How do you map that out? Do you keep a record of that in your CRM or a spreadsheet or something along the lines of that, or just keep it in your head?
Yeah, no, I think you need it in a document or in paper, like sheets, or a CRM. I tend not to like go personally down the path of the CRM because there are a lot of rules and regulations around like once you put it in. So I'm more interested in just, what I love about LinkedIn is that you get an instant decision. You know whether what you're doing is good, because if in a month like nobody has messaged you or nobody has started engaging or whatever, your profile views haven't gone up, then there's a problem and we need to fix it. So I'm more interested in how many people messaged me that week. It doesn't matter what they messaged me about, but how many people took the time to proactively message me. How was my post doing as far as engagement, and how did that start conversations? So I don't think you need to overdo it. I don't think you've got to save like every granular piece of info, but I think it's nice to have a healthy understanding and appreciation for what's working and what isn't. And I guarantee you, probably the content that you think is working probably isn't. It's always the way. Like if you enjoy making it, yeah, you could almost guarantee that, yeah, that's not going to be the highest performing piece. And that was interesting. And I wanted to know, are we really addressing pain points? Are we really addressing that emotional piece? And my biggest revelation of social selling revelation a word? I think so. It came from that very piece of recording data. I realized that so many of us produce things that are only 50% value. They only serve value to half of the audience. Remote working is the easiest example. We turn up and we champion remote working, but then all the jobs we've got are in the office 4 days a week. So learning to understand these little bottlenecks or these pieces of data and where people message and where it stops is absolutely vital. Without it, you're going to struggle to ramp it up when you need to, because I'm all in for data. However you want to save it, I start collecting today.
Yeah, fantastic. Something that we do with our clients. So I think there's a million different like touch points where you can figure this out, from conversations to inviting them onto the podcast or running events and having questionnaires or qualitative research, all that kind of thing. You get all that stuff together and you can create a real good picture about where your ideal clients are coming from, what things you need to push more, and then it just filters even down into what you actually post out on social media, just seeing if it works. I think a lot of people just put stuff out there, don't they, without any sort of thought process, and hopefully it performs well. I think this segues nicely into the second sort of topic we wanted to talk about, and that was driving purpose with your social posting, your social selling, and sort of creating additional value. So I think we've touched on the first point, is to kind of get in the data, understanding the market and the pain points. But I think let's walk it back a little bit, because I think let's comment on the current state of LinkedIn and personal branding attempts, because I feel like there's been a bit of an explosion with people seeing the benefits of LinkedIn, but not a lot of them get it right, do they?
No, and I think that's okay. I turn up, have a great time, and see what you want to talk about. That I think we've got to remember, there's something very, for me anyway, there's something very kind of freeing. There's something very nice about feeling confident enough to turn up and share personal stuff, and do that. So I'm okay with that. But I think if we presume that that's the foundation of a financially stable business, we're wrong. So I think turn up, get the experience, get the bit of confidence, then that's when we've got to start transitioning into how many clients pay us because they like us. I would say that's quite small. People pay us because we solve a problem for them. The fact that we're likable is that extra little golden star that guaranteed us that sale. But people pay us to solve a problem. Sharing pictures of the dog or the divorce or whatever you want to do is is nice, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but what I am saying is that that's got to be balanced with people understanding what it is you do and how you solve it. So how is LinkedIn at the moment? The thing that interests me, there's certain faces that come up and they've been posting the same stuff like 6 or 8 months, and it's just not going anywhere. And that surprises me, that someone isn't stopping and saying this isn't working. It's not personal, it's just how it is, right? But other than that, yeah, I think it's got to be value every time. If people don't know what you do and they don't know how it helps them, then you're not selling anything. You're not getting the candidate, you're not getting the client. So yeah, I think it can be a bit messy, but I mean, that's okay. Everyone starts somewhere, right?
Absolutely. So devil's advocate here, I've seen comments saying that there needs to be a split between the personal to give you kind of that advantage on the algorithm to show up on more people's feeds, but then you've also got to have the hooks or whatever, the way to sort of get the call to action. What's your thoughts on that? Or do you think everything that you can put out can have some kind of like commercial sort of spin, even if subtle?
So I from the hook perspective, it's a very personal thing. I don't want people thinking that they're there because I have spent hours and hours crafting these really incredible hooks. I definitely turn up more with the bias that I've got something to share and I hope it's helpful. So I think writing's important? Yes. Do I want to get better? Yes. But I do think we have to be careful how much attention we're putting on these hooks, because for me, it's not about getting maximum engagement. It's, I would rather 10 people engage and 3 people reached out to do training than 200 people engage and nobody reaches out. So yeah, I think hooks and I think writing in a nice way is great, but as recruiters, we've already got a bit of a bad rep from some people. Don't step into that kind of wide process of delivering these great hooks and then it doesn't get backed up with anything. That's disappointing. So I would focus more on sharing things in a meaningful way, like what problem could we solve. I'd focus more on that than the headline. But I think we could get better. I think crafting better headlines definitely helps, but I think we've got to be careful how far we push that.
Yeah, great. And can we have a way to potentially start a conversation, begin the sales process with a personal, more personal aimed post? And how would that look?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody, for example, like mums and dads or parents, is a great example here. Being able to share that, one of the things you've done about starting your own business was because you're being forced in an office. That's quite a personal post, but it can definitely lead into a job advert. That's why we love working with this client, because X, Y, and Z. So I think there's definitely ways you have to remember that our job is not to be the hero or the main star of the show. It's our job to position them as the star of the show. So I don't want to be positioned as central stage. What I want them to do is to read something and position themselves as that person, and that to me is great personal branding. It's branding in a way where they are part of that story, they are part of that content. That for me is when the magic happens. So yeah, you can absolutely post about things that have happened to you and then lead that into, that's why you love working with this client, or that's why values are really important. And it's fine to have a campaign of content over a month. If back in the recruitment days, if I had like a director role coming up, I would definitely start producing content a month before about autonomy and expenditure and budgets and hiring power, all these things that would be important to a director. So you can definitely feed your opinion into a bigger picture of driving them into adverts and other things. I also think that adverts can be written in the same way as content as well, just as a personal thing. I think that Zooms can be constructed in the same way as a post. In fact, I think we could send proposals, emails, all of it can be delivered once you've found your style. All of it can be delivered and in exactly the same way, and that's also really exciting.
How do we find our style?
I think it's about doing it in a social way. It's about removing yourself. So many people say, I'm glad we've got this job. We're pleased we've got this. I'm excited for. I'm an award winning. It's like me. It's learning to position them, isn't it? It's okay if you're feeling a bit crappy because you've got a toxic boss. Here's what you can do about it. Here's ideas for you. It's just about changing the language. If you read something and you're picking up I, we, me, then it's probably not the best content. If you're reading it and saying you could be feeling this, it's about transformation. Everybody wants transformation, right? We always start in, nobody wants to finish a story or a process in a crappy transformation. So we always start with the bad bit, so that instantly is like, we always start with the negative and we always finish on something positive, because that's what we do. We're recruiters. We help people get better jobs or make better hiring decisions. So instantly, even just knowing we've got a transformation happening, that is a bit of a system, because it's bad to good. Telling people how to apply for a job. We want that call to action. I don't know if you ever noticed this, but people don't use call to actions. How do you know what people want you to do if you don't tell them? So call to actions is part of this. So it's just about feeding in these things that take them on a journey. And I think it's always bad to good. I think that's always the journey. No one wants to finish reading something sad, do they? Well, some people do maybe, but I don't. And instantly, once we understand that, we use that in adverts, we can use that in Zooms. We can, it's a basic foundation of just making people feel good and making them the star of the show. It's simple, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really good book, if anyone wants to explore this in more, is the Story Brand. Have you read that one before? Yeah, so that kind of breaks that, doesn't it? Putting the customer as the hero in their own story, and how you come across that way really sort of, it just adds the engagement, doesn't it? The way that you can really hit home the message.
I love the whole concept of story within in that process. I think it's so powerful. I'm actually going to America later in the year to be qualified in doing story, and I think I'll be one of the first kind of ex-recruitment people to actually be qualified in like an official story qualification. And I'm so excited about that, because it was a huge revelation for me the minute I suddenly discovered that who is the star of the show. It's a real game changer, isn't it? Who is the main character, who is the supporting act, and these are really interesting things. And if you look at brands in all types of Apple, all these other things, you're always the star of the show, aren't you? It's always you with the iPhone or whatever it might be, the computer. It's never them. And it's interesting when we start thinking about how people engage and buy. We realize that we have got an ability to really play an influential part in that. And for me, that's exciting, way more exciting than a cold call.
Yeah.
Anyway. They're not the same, are they?
No, exactly. And do you know what? It's great for recruiters, because they are in a space where they are literally changing lives on a regular basis. If they find someone that job that takes them away from the toxic boss, or allows them to relocate to a dream location, or put someone on a higher salary so they can not worry as much about money, that's life changing for people in that position, especially in the way the world goes now. And I don't think a lot of recruitment agencies have figured that out yet, and they're still just sharing out a job, and that's as far as it goes, or talking about how they've taken their team all away somewhere, and it's just either self-aggrandizing, or it's just not providing enough value.
I truly believe that. One thing again I discovered I loved about recruitment is there's not many industries that you can turn up without a degree, or the background isn't that important. You can actually find your footing pretty easily. But then once you've found that, you can buy yourself a laptop and a LinkedIn license, and you can live anywhere and recruit anywhere. And I really love that entrepreneurial spirit about the people that come into what we do. I also am excited to see what happens with introverts versus extroverts. And I think typically when I came into the industry, it was definitely extroverts were more prominent in recruitment, because it was face-to-face, door knocking, cold calling. And I do think that it's going to be an interesting time to see a different flavor come into the industry and what they can do with it. And that's something I love about social selling. You don't have to be the smartest in the room. You don't have to be the biggest ego. You don't have to be the most confident. And these are typically things that, have maybe stopped some people in the past from doing really well. So I think it's also changing who is going to do well in recruitment. And that is also exciting. I love the concept of, a mum at home or a dad at home. Suddenly LinkedIn gives them the opportunity to have a really great career. Someone who's in a wheelchair who maybe has been not able to apply for jobs in a city centre because they can't drive. All of these things, I know we're getting into like granular minorities, but there's nothing that suggests they couldn't be amazing, like superstars in recruitment. And isn't that exciting to think that social selling opens this up? It opens the door to a completely different face and behavior and community. And I don't know what that will look like, but I'm excited to see what that could look like.
Absolutely. And I think it all just comes down also to just the maturing market, especially if you're dealing with such high potential clients with hundreds of staff with massive budgets. You're starting to go down into like account-based like marketing sort of support, and the social selling plays a huge role, because their buying cycle will be huge. It could be 6 months to a year before they even decide to pull the trigger. They'll try it themselves, they'll fail with an agency, and then they'll finally find you. But allowing you to be at every single touch point in a non-harassing way that's going to kind of put them off if you're hitting them with a cold call all the time, they're just going to turn off to you. But if you do it in a nice subtle way over a prolonged period of time, you're going to come top of mind immediately, aren't you?
I think so. And I think something that you just said that kind of sparked a little thought is that you've also kind of got to go in a little bit hard, right? It's just turning up with a little like or a lovely comment every other day. I think we need a bit more than that. But it's about finding your own, your own style for sure. But this is why I come back to the data piece, the strategy, having an overview of what works where, because you definitely don't want to fall into the trap of just a little like. There's got to be a process to this, but it definitely delivered much softer than sales. I wonder, I think people enjoy it more as well. Who wants to go into Monday and you're kind of faced with like, I don't know, 50 calls for the day? It's not like the most. And what do you learn from that, really? Great, you pick up one piece of relevant, what do people call it, like a lead or something. 20 minutes online, you could probably have found like millions of things like that. So I think it's also about putting excitement back in the day, and it's about giving people control to engage in a way that actually starts a relationship rather than a sales process. But yeah, each of their own. You've got to find your own little speed and pace, haven't you? But I think it's got to be a goal. Don't just turn up and like stuff and be nice and friendly. There's got to be an outcome. There is a commercial element to this.
Absolutely. From my mind, to get my sort of like marketing sort of spin going, and especially for the audience if they're marketers, I think this is perfect. This new sort of, well, it's not new, it's been around for a while, but this kind of change in thought about how you sell, because then the role of marketing changes a little bit, because like you said, it's so easy. You could go out and get 200 leads in an afternoon or something off LinkedIn if you really put your mind to it. For a marketing to get that many inbound leads would be an extremely long campaign over quite a period of time. And potentially, are they all sort of, there might be marketing qualified leads, but are they sales qualified leads? Probably not. So I think that the element of marketing needs to be a lead generator is old school. And I think, recruiters can go and do that. But now what the role of marketing has in terms of this social selling is they can provide the support to create really high quality content. They then, the sales and the consultant team, can go and make those really memorable touch points that go in hard, but they've got the branding team or the marketing, the designers behind it to make it really just stand out on the feed or in the DMs, etc.
I think so. Like, everyone loves a really sexy download that's helpful. The recruiter's got the info of what to put in it. The marketer can make it look beautiful. We buy with our eyes as well. I know we spoke about this before, but I do think the two coexist just really lovely together. Because you are judged on the quality of what you're doing. You are judged on how you turn up. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that you don't write perfectly, But I think if you're going to go out with this download to get email addresses, or you're going out to deliver something good, it's got to be good, isn't it? There's nothing more underwhelming than saying, yeah, we've got this great whatever, and then you get it and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not great. And it's worse when you know the person and it's like, oh my gosh, it's now really awkward because I know them and it's still not great. So I think this is where marketing are able to put the creative spin. They're able to take people on that journey to the next level. I think it's definitely a little partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to touch on probably the last kind of thing on LinkedIn, because I actually do want to dive into the other elements of social selling. I know you want to talk about that as well. So just put our minds in the head of a recruitment agency owner or like a marketing director, and they're thinking, great, social selling just seems like the perfect way I can make it work with our marketing department. But our whole consultant team is still kind of in the old school, hitting the phones. From your experience, how do we change the mindset of the sales team? How do we get them more involved in personal branding if it's not something that is a strong point in the business?
Interesting. And I guess number one is, back to, choice, isn't it? And I suppose that for some people, they may not want to do it. For me, though, I think it's about when people see the benefits of it, I think it means something very, very different. Some of the issues I have seen before when I've been working with a client is, very recently, there was a team of about 8 of them. The issue they had is that they were producing a lot of the content that they wanted people to post. And, Monday came around, everyone was posting the same thing. Wednesday, everyone posted the same thing. So I think it's about understanding what, trying to get people to come up with ideas and be creative. And I think when people feel that it's a plan that they have participated in, a plan that they have built, they want to take part and they want to see it succeed. That's kind of like basic change management, I suppose, isn't it? Like, buyer behavior is that if you're forced to do something, you don't want to do it. If you're part of building something new that benefits everybody, you're probably more engaged. So I think it's about getting people on side. As a director, as an agency owner, I think it's about trying to maybe not control it too much. I think it's about giving people the space to do what they want. And I think we've got to give people time in the diary to make this happen as well. If the KPIs you've got for your team are incredibly high, where are they going to fit this in? So something's always got to give to make it work. The biggest thing I would say is that if you're going to start campaigns or you're going to start this social selling process, is start it for the right reasons. Start it because it gives people the chance to build better connections, because it gives people, don't, ram it down someone's throat if they get it wrong slightly or whatever. I think it's got to be a space that enables people to get creative. And it also helps with sales calls, by the way. I will add that in. I'm not a fan of sales calls, but I get they still need to be done. Some places want to keep them. It's amazing how much more you give people to talk about when they're able to absorb content online, when they're able to engage in conversations, when they're able to participate in webinars and networking events. So if you want to keep the sales and you're worried that it replaces it, I would argue that it actually gives people more to talk about. It gives them substance. So we saw X post about this the other day, especially if it's from thought leaders. So I think it's about removing this fear of the unknown a little bit, isn't it? So enjoy it, give people space to do it. I think give people space to do it how they want to do it. And training, offer people training, give them support, help them out with what is good content and bad content, what are maybe some things we don't want to engage in, what do we want to do, especially in software or really, really, sectors that are just so saturated. Instead of thinking in content, thinking like problem and community, and that is the same thing. It's still personal branding, but it's enabling people to do it slightly differently. So I think there's millions of ways. Brainstorming is a great place to start.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, really like that. one thing that I kind of popped to my mind while you was talking is, and as that's something that people don't talk about, and something I've experienced when putting out content through personal branding, LinkedIn, etc. You get comments. They might have not even engaged in it, but you're on calls and they say, "Oh, I watched your video earlier. I really enjoyed what you said. We want to start doing that." And it can be a really good way to subtly influence the behaviours that you want to get out of your client or candidates, isn't it? If you start talking about something that they should always do in their hiring process, give feedback, etc., like that, then they can see that, oh, that is an important thing. I do need to kind of put that in place. So there's that benefit to it as well, isn't there?
I would say almost exclusively most clients that people get online are not their biggest engagers. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that, especially in recruitment, because let's be honest, most candidates aren't going to openly engage in your post when you're talking about job adverts or other things. The power of association is incredibly interesting. And that's one of the other things that is great about social selling, is being able to associate or be seen or engaging or liking with other people in the industry that are already well kind of respected. That's interesting. But yeah, I think most people that engage don't end up your client. Interestingly, it's about they see the post and later they tell you about it. So there's definitely a whole lot of lurking and secret liking going on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go. Let's finish up on social selling, and then we'll have some quick fire questions. I know that again, like I say this every call, like, oh, we should be about 30-40 minutes, and then we end up going
I talk a lot. I'm aware of that.
I don't know. I just it's me. I just get so interested in everything. I just want to break down everything in more detail. So talk to me about social selling. So it's from my perspective, ignorant as I am, I did think it was all just kind of over LinkedIn and maybe a Twitter or whatever, and that's how you did it. But you've said to me it's a lot more. So give me the play-by-play.
So I think the easiest way to think about it is a recruiter and then somebody recruiting HR. Like HR is the sector, recruitment is what they are, and it's a bit like social selling, personal branding. Personal branding is like the HR piece, recruitment is like the social selling piece. So when I think about social selling, I think about sales loops, I think about processes. So the personal branding is about getting to know people, messaging. But for me, social selling is about how do we get an email address? How do we then keep in contact with them? How do we then get Zooms with them? How do we drive them to make decisions that engage in our platform or our content or our community? So that for me is the difference. Social selling is understanding that there are different values required at different points that encourage or influence the buyer behavior. Personal branding is about how they see that. So that's the difference, in my opinion.
So from my marketing perspective, like the LinkedIn, the personal branding, that's kind of like the awareness stage of a funnel. Then when you start getting into like webinars or calendar links or sort of introduction calls, that is like consideration or conversion sort of part of it.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we're offering them something to download. That's a different value than connecting with them. Getting them to give us an email address so they can keep in touch with us. That's a different thing. Giving them something that they could maybe purchase or engage with us in that's minimal value, that kind of gets them out of that stranger behavior, in the sense we don't really know each other. Social selling is about thinking, if we bring somebody in on this value, how do we get them to exit on this value? And for me, it's about removing that need to I kind of went down this path, I should add, because I was in the very situation I'm about to explain. Personal branding was working, I was doing really well, but it was also quite stressful, probably as stressful as just doing normal sales, because I needed every post, every engage. I was manually there, like kind of filtering out people that I thought might be interested, because it was literally post. And that's when I realized there's got to be a bigger system at play here. There's got to be a way that we connect the dots. How do we connect a new contact to a message, to an email, to a nurture, to a webinar? How do we start creating this little strand that actually puts all of this together without us then needing to rely on post to post, and that's where I suddenly realized that there's a bigger system at play, and that's why I'd encourage people to explore these bigger systems. It's about getting good at sharing the message, but it's also getting good at people to buy, and encouraging them to be proactive and take some of that workload off of you as a recruiter, that they're kind of a super fan and want to help out and participate and do things. So social selling is for me is about taking off some of that stress that you do everything yourself.
Yeah, perfect. So one thing that I'm coming to my head is from a marketing perspective. So I think marketing really struggle with their, and look, you're talking here, this disconnects from someone engaging and being aware of you to them being kind of in that sort of sales cycle or that funnel being eventually closed. There is a disconnect there and making that sort of that bridge. And you'll find a lot of marketers, the director of the business will be, look, I'm getting all these likes on my LinkedIn post. Why aren't they customers? Kind of thing. Yeah.
Why aren't they buying?
Yeah, exactly. So how do we sort of bridge that gap? Is there any use cases out there in the wild that you see work really well in the recruitment space?
Not really. If we're considering sort of LinkedIn and stuff, it is a bit manual. There's a few things to consider though. Number one, LinkedIn owns the data, and if for any reason your account went or whatever, you've lost all of that work. So for me, the biggest thing I aim to do almost instantly is to find a way of communicating outside of LinkedIn, and usually that starts with running a community or being able to get an email address. The second thing, if we're going to invest in connecting with people, how do we keep track of that? How do we keep record of who we are connecting with and why, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't break kind of GDPR rules and all these other things? I don't think we've got to get really smart about it. I think we've just got to get a bit more mindful about it. Actually, quite basic systems are a nice way to keep in touch. If you've welcomed people to your network, don't send them everything you've got in day one. Go back to them in a week's time when you can offer them, keep in touch with them. LinkedIn also is great because the more we communicate with someone, the more they're likely to see our content, because LinkedIn pushes our content to people who engages with us. So I don't think it's about being overly complex. It's just about trying to marry the dots up a little bit and not fall victim to, if there is an algorithm change or I don't know, your account gets locked or something, that you're not putting yourself back to zero. If you're using different platforms, it's linking those up. Are people on Instagram also a different buyer to the one on LinkedIn? If so, why? If it's a tech community, are we engaging in Slack rather than LinkedIn? If you're in Germany, who's on LinkedIn, who's on the German version? It's just thinking about how do we connect the dots between these micro engagements and bring them together in a central place. One of the really good tools that I do like is Sales Navigator. I actually prefer that to the Recruiter package, because it does tell you when people are engaging. You're able to save alerts and things. That's a pretty nifty little tool without having to automate and stuff. And the other thing is, I should add, I'm only interested in the data of relevant people. So if 200 people engage and 20 of those are, I would be disappointed with that, but if 20 of them were recruitment directors, that's the 20 I'm interested in. I'm not going to make life difficult and try and create a process for 200. So it's just about thinking, where do people come in? How do we keep in touch with them? And how do we guarantee they see our content? Because that's a big misconception. People get disappointed when people don't engage in their content. 9 times out of 10, it's just people haven't seen it. So how do we get them to see it? And that's messaging, that's communities, that's nurture campaigns, that's Zooms, that's virtual coffee, micro messaging, value. There's tons. The world is your oyster, really. But that's what it is for me. It's about driving them to a platform where we host it. Our website or our community, we host that. We can't get locked out of it. No one can change the rules on it. And I think that's what we've now got to start thinking about, is connecting the dots. So that's all it is for me, just connecting the dots.
Yeah, love it. And I think if it all comes full circle for me from what you're saying, is if you really nail like the mission of what you want to do, then you can create that community, that sort of close communication channel all around that, and you'll have a load of people together on that same mission. And then you know you've like you said, world is your oyster. You can do what you want with those people, can't you? You can nurture them and build lasting relationships that matter more than just a quick sale.
Yeah, and I know talking about this, if someone hasn't started, it all sounds a little bit like, oh gosh, how do I? You know, it goes back to that first question. The minute you understand who the person is and how you help them, all of this other stuff always feeds from that. Sometimes it's a little bit less obvious than others, but as you know, it always comes back to that fundamental basic question: who is it that I'm helping, and how is it that I help them? The minute you understand that, everything feeds from that. So if you listen to any of this and you're a bit like, oh gosh, how do I even do that? It's just back to that first question: who do I help? You know, and that's an interesting question, because the minute we go, who do we help? And I always say to people, what is it they want? They always position themselves as what the person wants, and that's wrong, because the person doesn't want you. The person wants the outcome that you deliver. And you know, so it's once you've got those basic fundamentals sorted out, all of this other stuff just bolts into it. And sometimes a bit uglier than other times, but it does. It all bolts into it. It's fun. People should enjoy learning this stuff, you know. But yeah, if anyone's listened to this and they're definitely confused, back to question one: who is it that you help? That's all you need to know.
Yeah, simple but amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's getting those foundations, isn't it? I think it's the consistency of getting out there. It's the experimentation, but then it's also having that insight into who exactly that you know you should be talking to and how to reach them effectively.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and figuring out, like, if this is the problem, how does that problem make them behave? How do they feel? You might not get it right, but it's interesting. The minute you put yourself there to think about, how would I feel if I was in this environment? Suddenly, you know, the way we then communicate makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? So it's not even about getting it right every time. It's just trying to consider, you know, the way people buy. And this is why I said about the headline, I'm a bit like, I think it's good to a certain degree. People buy through words. We use words and we say, you know, if you're feeling trapped working in a toxic boss, you know, someone's either going to resonate with toxic and trapped, or they're not. You know, being able to talk about pro mums, flexibility, pro dads, you know, someone's either going to resonate with that. You know, would I? No, because I don't have kids. So there's no point selling me the fact that I can leave at 3. Unless chihuahuas count as kids, then I'm screwed. I'm not interested, you know. And this is why you figure out who and what the problem is and how they feel, because once you've got that, you're able to scrap out the language that just doesn't mean anything. And that's the beauty of this, is that it's not complicated. It's a simple process, isn't it? Really, the same as sales.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Jamie. I really appreciate all your breakdown on that. So just to finish up, just a quick fire question round. What is your favorite pizza topping?
I would go artichoke. I'm obsessed with artichoke. Eat it every day.
Artichoke, really?
Yeah.
Last person said anchovies, so we're getting some.
Yeah, some strange. I mean, I live in Spain, so artichoke on pizza here is
of
pretty
course,
normal.
Yeah.
So I would go artichoke 100%, all in.
Love that. What is your best productivity technique / method? You know, how do you stay productive?
Deep working. Cal Newport actually wrote a book about it. Incredible. I recommend anyone to read it. Deep working, 100%.
Yeah, I've read that book. Amazing. And I think I gave that to my guy Will when he first started. I was like, yeah, you got to read this.
It's great, isn't it? It was like one of the few books I have read that's actually made a genuine difference. I deep work every day. 100% recommend it.
Yeah, great. What's your favorite podcast?
Do you know what? I'm gonna go Joe Rogan. I absolutely love his podcast. One of my favorite ones. I don't know if you know who Paul Stamets is. He's the guy who talks a lot about mushrooms and stuff. But I love Joe Rogan. I love that people get to turn up and just share their own view, whether you agree with it or not. I love the fact that it's this space where people just talk about it in a very open way, and I'm all in on that. So yeah, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I like Joe Rogan. I'm listening to the CoffeeZilla one at the moment. The guy that like exposed all the scammers and in the Bitcoin space, you know, the cryptocurrency space. Really interesting what that is. And then final one, Jamie, before I let you go. What company do you believe does marketing the best? Does it need to be recruitment? It just can be anywhere in any sector.
Yeah, do you know what? the one I always pick is Apple, and I'm going to go with Apple. From a recruitment point of view, back in the day, they I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but he quoted that anybody who works in tech that feels a misfit has a home with them or something, and that's always stuck in my mind from a recruitment perspective. So yeah, marketing, I would definitely go Apple. People see the product as being more valuable. They've nailed it, haven't they?
Steve Jobs has that amazing talk, doesn't he, on video, where he talks about storytelling and some of the stuff that we touched on now. It's definitely worth a listen if you haven't seen that one. Yeah,
and
really nice.
And of the size they are, they pretty much do escape any negative press, really, from horror stories. And that's the other reason why I value them, is because I think a lot of what they share is true as well. It obviously is a good place to work and all these things. So yeah, I love what Apple do, and I love the message, and I think it's true, and that's why I like it so much.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so
You're
much,
welcome.
Jamie. It's been absolutely a pleasure talking to you. I think there's some real value, real insight. If anyone wants to get access to a little bit more detail in terms of social selling, personal branding, maybe you want to get access to some of those processes you was talking about, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn would be the best. And I kind of work with people at the moment in two ways. I've got a just like a discovery session, I suppose, which is really built for agencies that feel they've already got a structure in place. They just want to refine it or get better at it. And then anybody that's maybe running their own business, or they haven't really got anything in place, then I have got a kind of full coaching program that we do over 8 weeks, which physically builds their social selling for them, from personal branding to lead magnets to landing pages, everything that they need. And we do that over 8 weeks. So and free stuff, we've got a couple of communities and stuff like that as well. So all stems from LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.